And first order of business is Pledge of Allegiance, and I'm going to ask Matt Culver to lead it.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you're wondering why I asked Matt to do it, it's because he's the only really famous person in the room, having been quoted in a front page article in the Wall Street Journal this week. I assume you knew that.
No, I spoke with someone briefly from the Wall Street Journal, but I did not see an article.
I will send you a copy of the article. It was about derelict boats washing up after Irma. First order of business is the roll call, please.
Yes. Charles Venuto.
Here.
John Byron.
Here.
Vinnie Tremento.
Here.
John Windsor.
Here.
Terry Casto.
Here.
Karen McLaughlin.
Here.
John Durkee.
Here.
Courtney Barker.
Here.
Todd Swingle.
Here.
Jean Artusa.
Here.
Lorraine Koss is out of town and has to be excused, and Danielle Bowden had a conflict and has to be excused.
Okay.
Yeah.
Our chairman, Lorraine Koss, is in Minneapolis on family business, and we wish her well. Next item is the approval of the agenda. I accept a motion.
So moved.
Second.
A motion second to approve the agenda. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes 6-0 or 7-0?
Unanimously.
Unanimously. I love it. Charles, you're a voter this time, and
I was.
you were.
That
Okay.
was quick.
Next order of business is to approve the minutes of our last meeting. I accept the motion.
Motion to approve. Second.
Second goes to Charles, and we have motion second to approve the minutes. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Virginia, the floor is yours for your monthly progress report.
Okay, so the muck dredging master permit that you all asked that we recommend to the county commission approved that. We've executed the task order. The kickoff meeting is next week, so we're excited to get that underway. The Turkey Creek post-Irma re-dredging was also approved by the county commission. The Oyster Reef construction at Geiger Point was completed last month. It's the largest project built so far, over 1,000 linear feet. The MIMS muck dredging and outflow treatment project, the pipeline and equipment has begun to mobilize, and Matt is conducting weekly meetings with the contractor. Sykes Creek dredging bids, the bid opening was pushed back to December 20th due to some questions about the bid package, but we're looking forward to that bid opening next week. The muck finders data, Walker Dawson reviewed the data collected by muck finders and compared that to data collected by professional survey crews, and for the Mathers area, they matched very, very well. For the Sykes Creek area, they matched except for some very deep areas where, you know, once you look at what's missing and why, it's the area is so deep that the probes weren't long enough. So the method is working well where they can reach the bottom of the muck, but we'll have to come up with other means for finding those, probing the deeper areas. The Indian Harbor Beach cost share contract has been fully executed. Cost share contracts with Palm Bay, Melbourne, and Titusville have been signed by the county and sent to the cities, so we expect those back any day now. And the website, the committee, you had requested that we separately post these progress reports and the financial reports in a separate area on the website so that people can find them without having to go through the entire agenda package. So we've done that. They're all itemized by month, and we also posted the audit report that was presented to you last month. Jumping down to work underway this month, you know, there's a lot going on with the Florida legislative session, preparing for that and working on funding applications. So please keep an eye on what's going on in Tallahassee. Hopefully, something good will shake out for matching funds for the lagoon. We have 3 stormwater treatment projects that the county is pursuing that are already, that the design task orders have been issued. And staff has been working with Vinnie and the county's website folks on researching what sort of website layouts would work to revamp our website to match the county's new mobile-friendly website and add a lot of the features that you have talked about in the past, including mapping and infographics to be able to have an atlas for people to be able to search project information better than what's on there now. So the only other thing I wanted to highlight from the staff report is on the future topics for special presentations. We don't have any special presentations today. We'll have a brief word from Leesa Souto on grass clipping proposal. And for the next 2 meetings, I think you'll be very busy reviewing substitute project requests. So I'm not planning to schedule any more special presentations until next spring unless you direct otherwise. All right, so that's it for staff report. I'll move on to the fiscal report unless questions.
Just a question about oyster reefs. So the zoo, in addition to Geiger Point, did 3 demonstration reefs across the water's edge across behind Eastminster. Are we tracking that activity as well?
What do you mean by tracking?
Well, I mean, you reported on Geiger Point, but you didn't say anything about the other one, and I thought it was of interest as well.
Yes, it certainly is of interest. The Geiger Point project was a county-funded with grants that the county obtained. The demonstration projects across the other side of the 192 Melbourne Causeway, we worked on in a support fashion, but those were legislative dollars that came directly to the zoo. And so we weren't directly involved in that project, but we can certainly
I was just curious.
track it
Thank you.
anyway.
Yes.
Two quick questions. The first one, even though it uses volunteers, you know my objection to the muck finders being somewhat expensive. Since it's clear that there's areas that it's going to be difficult, why don't we simply use the muck finders program in shallower water instead of trying to replicate what the sonar is already being accurately doing?
Right. So, and that was the idea, was that we would use the muck finders to help us identify where to send the professionals, where to focus our efforts. But to understand whether that method was working or not, the committee had asked us to compare it to professionally done surveys. And so we had them overlap with 2 areas.
No. So now that we know,
Yes.
muck finders is going to be shallow.
Yes.
Okay. And then the Geiger project, awesome, 1,000 linear feet. We're supposed to do like 5,200 linear feet next year.
Or 10,400,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Is there even a snowball's chance that's going to happen?
We are working with a consultant on a task order to design how we could do that. The zoo is interested in trying to accomplish half of that 2-mile goal, and we would be contracting for the other mile of the 2 miles. So we haven't given up yet.
Okay.
It will be challenging to stage up from half a mile a year to 2 miles a year, but we're all still game for trying.
And you have the authority to direct the Muck Finders project without any help, yes?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Okay, financial report. So on the table, you have a revised financial report. The reason for that is that yesterday we received confirmation from the county finance that the September revenue check, or it's not a check, but a deposit arrived. And so we now know the total revenues collected from the sales tax during the previous fiscal year. And so that first line, the actuals, is now $32,072,164. So that's the reason for the extra handout on the table. And on the back side of the handout, you have the revised graph. So you can see how the actual revenues tracked fairly closely to the Department of Revenue projections, just below the Department of Revenue projections, and well above the county's conservative projections. So going forward, I'm not sure that we want to assume that we're going to collect everything that the Department of Revenue projects, but we could certainly up our projection.
Two quick questions. All this money is carry-forward money, correct? It's not earmarked to a specific fiscal year. You can spend it later if it's in the bank?
Yes.
Okay. And that being the case, we have a Lagoon plan that's based on $320 million over the years and parceled into individual years. I, for one, agree that we can figure out how to spend money after we get it rather than projecting that we're going to. But will we be seeing a revision to the Lagoon plan for the year coming, year two, that we'll be dealing with, that does in fact reflect money we actually have,
Yes.
rather than having some sort of contingency money bubbling around that we don't touch?
Right. We would reflect everything that we've already collected
Okay.
last year. We would revise our collection estimates for this year, and we would slide forward, accelerate the schedule on all the projects
Yep.
in the plan that we have willing partners to accelerate.
And the money that we're projecting for the fiscal year, future fiscal year we're dealing with, will be $32 million. We're anticipating $32 million based on 1/10 of $320 million.
We could leave those at 34 million, which is what the
34,
plan
is it?
is,
Okay.
or we could increase those if we feel comfortable doing so.
I think we may have trouble finding projects to sop it up, but give us your best shot when we get to that. Anything else, please?
No.
All right. Any questions on the monthly report or the finances? We'll move on to other reports and special presentations. Christine, you're going to talk to us about public record law.
I am. I know you received an initial explanation of all the rules that you have to follow regarding public records from Christina. From time to time, when there's interesting things to talk about that I think are relevant, I will bring them up. So today I want to talk about emails, texts, and I want to touch on social media. As a reminder, electronic public records are subject to the same disclosure and retention requirements as written. The location of your emails and texts does not control the applicability of public records. Emails and texts sent, received on private devices, if they are of the subject of this official business of this committee, they're subject to public records law. Just want to remind you of the definition of a public record, and this is provided by the Supreme Court. All materials made or received in connection with official business, which are used to perpetuate, communicate, or formalize knowledge. All materials are open for public inspection unless exempt from disclosure. So we have two recent examples of some problems where officials ran into public records violation. In Martin County, 2 county commissioners were arrested for criminal first-degree misdemeanor violations of the Florida Public Records Law. They were charged with intentional refusal to provide emails from their private email accounts. This was in the context of a lawsuit. They're facing up to a year in jail and up to a $1,000 fine. A former commissioner was also issued a citation for $500 for an unknowing violation of public records laws. She didn't disclose records, and she claimed that a hacker deleted all the emails and contacts from her database, so they couldn't prove intent. And the county also has to pay for the other parties' attorney's fees and costs in pursuing those claims. In Tallahassee, they were recently sued. The city was sued for public records violations where the city manager deleted texts and was unable to produce the requested text in a public records request. The city didn't contest the violation. They're responding by instituting a policy on use of texting in county business, or city business, and attorney's fees and costs have been requested there. The city manager is also under investigation for ethics violations based on the content of those texts. So remember, doesn't matter if it's on your personal device, emails, texts regarding the business of this committee are subject to public records. So then that brings up the question of how do you maintain your emails. Anything sent to county staff is going to be captured in our system. Anything that's between other parties regarding a business of this committee, you either can maintain that on your own device, or if you like, you can forward that to Brandon Smith, and we'll maintain those for you. I would suggest that option if I were in your shoes. And if there are any public records requests, staff would ask you to produce them if we don't have any records from you. With texting, the county does have a policy for staff texting, and that is don't text. But if that happens to occur, we are required to take screenshots of those texts and email them into the county system for retention. Regarding social media, I want to remind you that is just another form of communication. The county has 3 social media websites: Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. And IT has a social media retention program called Archive Social. So any posting on those sites are retained and backed up. Any postings on other sites regarding official business, I would suggest that you screenshot those, and you can either retain those yourself or email them to Brandon. On the subject of open meeting laws in social media, you cannot communicate through social media, and communication goes as far as liking another COC member's post or sharing another COC member's post. Please avoid doing that. If you are concerned about getting information out to the public, then please go through Brandon, and we can handle it through him taking care of those postings and getting that information out and available. So if you have any questions, you can contact me about public records. If you have any questions about coordinating information getting into the county system, please talk with Brandon Smith.
Question, please, go ahead.
Since we're not supposed to communicate in any method about anything unless we're here in a public meeting, I wouldn't have an email to an individual about something to submit, right?
You wouldn't, but if you're emailing business issues with other people that are not committee members, and your email doesn't involve county staff, you can send it to county staff for retention purposes.
And if somebody posted, for example, that there is this meeting this morning on their Facebook page, and you put a thumbs up, a like, instead of reposting it yourself, that's a violation?
That is considered a communication, yes.
Well, it's not a violation.
Well, potentially it is, because David posted up, there was a thing, and I said, thumbs up, let's go to the meeting, and so theoretically, so now we've communicated via social media?
Potentially, yes. The public records law has not kept up with
common sense?
Right.
Okay.
Well,
So John, we're both avid fishermen.
Right.
Half of my business is outdoor, water related, well, probably 80% of it. I post meetings. So John, has a network of people that when he shares my post, more people are going to see it. We're increasing exposure of the meeting. We're actually being more transparent than we're required to do by doing that.
Right.
So,
People ask, where do you find the budget? When I get the stuff from Carol, I pull it, I put the link up, here's the budget information for all you people that are saying we're wasting money.
So, John, I think.
And that's not a problem. You can post that.
Right, but
The issue
if
is,
David reposted it or just put a thumbs up, that would be potentially a communication.
that potentially is. So I would,
There's no prohibition against communicating. There is a sunshine law prohibition against communicating on matters that you may vote on. But posting things,
That's not what she just said.
we are able to participate in the creation of public records, yes or no?
well, I think you're talking about two different things.
I am. I'm saying that we, as individuals, may create documents that fall under the public records law. I can send her an email.
Correct.
You can send him something, you can like his posting. That's a public records issue. It's not a sunshine issue.
It is because it's both. When you are engaging in communication, when the COC members are engaging in communication outside of an advertised meeting, that raises the issue.
On sunshine?
Yep.
Yes, open meeting
Only if
laws.
it's a matter on which we may vote. We are not going to vote on whether or not we have a meeting. We already did that.
It's not, it's about official business, so it's a bit broader than on a matter of what you may vote. It's official business.
We will agree to disagree.
So, Todd,
Common sense.
I think everybody needs to remember, she's just telling you the most conservative way to not get in trouble. That's
Right.
her job.
That's fine.
so I have to
it's-
unfriend
she's-
Mr. Durkee over here? Is that really what we need to do?
No, we don't need to unfriend, but if you post up something for the
I've been wanting
fishing.
to do that anyways. No, I'm just kidding.
Let's hear from Courtney and let's hear from Todd on this. You live in this world.
She's just being very conservative, and it's up to you to decide how you want to ride that train, you know, and she's not, she's also giving the law as it is today. She didn't write it. So she's just trying to tell you what it is today. It may be stupid, and I agree in some ways it's kind of silly that when you're on social media, everybody can see what you're doing. But, and it, you know, it is very transparent, but she's still trying to give you advice that if we're voting on something that's controversial, someday somebody might see that and file an ethics complaint against you because you broke a records law. So, and that's happened. I can tell you very surely that that's happened. And so she's just trying to give you advice on how to move through that. So it's up to you on how you want to deal with that. But she's just giving you the most conservative way to stay out of trouble.
And I appreciate it, and I've followed since day one. But the like thing just kind of caught me off guard.
And this was to your point and David's point about broadening the message, reaching each other's social circles. And Brandon and I talked earlier this week, and the question that was presented, and I need to do some research, and I'm not sure if he's had a chance to talk to the county, is if the Save Our Indian River Lagoon Facebook posts about the meeting, and then David shares it, but he shared the official Facebook page, their post about the meeting. Then if you click share off David's share, I think Facebook still treats it as an original post share. So David could share something, and then you could share something, and it would still be captured by the county's backup system, which would show David shared it and you shared it. And that would be, as I understand it, captured communication, which is protected.
Yes.
So, and I see Brandon's got his hand up because that was some research that we weren't, I'm not sure Facebook rules. I'm not Mark Zuckerberg or his brother, although if he has any money he wants to send to his sibling, he can send it to me. But that was something we were going to look into to see how Facebook handles shares of a share.
Todd?
Well, I guess my comment on that is just be careful, because the reality is whether it's captured and meets public records laws or not, I understand this, the whole like thing. The reality is that there's been a lot of cases that I've seen where, you know, that can be interpreted as signaling. You know, that can be, that's signaling of that you liked what he likes. That's starting to say that I'm going to vote the same way as you. And maybe this is as simple as on an agenda, but just stay away from it. And I guess the way I will handle mine personally is everything I've just heard talked about is that I want to share information, that there's already a fixed source of that information, take the one extra step just to cut and find that original source of information and share it yourself rather than sharing his post, so that there's not that connection between you as committee members and you're going back to the basic underlying public record that was already created, and that you're just sharing just share the agenda. If you share the agenda and he shares the agenda and we all share the agenda, I don't think there's any issue. If we start sharing each other's posts, whether there's an issue or not, it doesn't take a lawyer to have an issue. It takes a lawyer to want to file a lawsuit. So I know that's the way I will handle it, and I encourage us all to get communications out there, but get our own communications out there. If they are all a post of readily available public information, wonderful. Just don't share each other's stuff.
Great advice.
Yeah, and while Facebook does record the shares, so I can see whenever anyone shares the information, our archive social software does not keep a backup of that. So I just heard back from IT that it only tracks the actual comments and things on the page itself. It won't track those shares.
So disregard everything I said, basically.
We were hoping it would.
It's early to, yeah, except for the running one. It's early to be called wrong.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brandon.
I have a question for Christine and for Virginia. Have we had any troubles to date on either sunshine law or public records law with regard to the activity of this committee?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. So, A, we haven't done anything wrong yet as far as folks wanting to inquire. B, I'll just state a personal opinion. Yes, there is a set of legal interpretations and a set of law. I think sunshine law is a third rail. Keep your foot off it. But as far as public records, you create a public record, the public has access to it. I, for one, am a bit reluctant to go to an overly Jesuitic interpretation of that law. I think Courtney and Todd, who live in this world all the time, have offered good advice. Watch it yourself. And with that, if you don't get near this, you don't get near it. Let's move on unless there's more. Thank you. And thank you, Christine. It's something for us to all be cautious about. It bears on the credibility of this group. We're now at old business. Old business item A is findings from the field trip to the Florida On-Site Wastewater Association. How many of you went? Okay. I'm told it was like drinking from a fire hose, and you've learned a whole great bunch of new technology that turns bad stuff into good stuff. And there is a complete set of documents in the minutes package. It's posted online if anybody wants to explore new technology and basically in septic systems. It's a good read for the committee. Are there any questions on this? If not, we'll move on. Nick? Yes, please.
Just a quick comment. One, I thought it was a great summary, and I really appreciate it. Two, I think in the end, there still needs to be a lot more conversation about this, because there's some major policy implications of central sewer versus these on-site systems. They each have their place. We've just come off of seeing maintenance issues or upgrade issues on central systems where you have a relatively well-funded single maintenance entity and there's still problems. And we are now looking at approaches that will have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of questionably funded maintenance entities, being each individual homeowner that owns now an entire high-end advanced treatment system. They will, I guarantee, they will work perfectly day one. Will they work day two? Will they work year one? Will they work year 10? That's a major policy decision, I believe, for us as a committee to think about as we talk about funding and where that lands.
I think part of our charter is to explore new technology. This was an answer to that. Virginia, are you satisfied that the county, both your department and Mark Regan's and so on, are adequately in pursuit of new technologies and more cost-effective measures? And are you prepared to bring us anything that's within our ambit?
Well, what's in the plan are, and so what you're talking about are the advanced treatment units.
Yep.
That is most of what we saw on the field trip. What's in the plan are not those advanced treatment units, it's upgrade of drain fields with passive systems. The passive drain field upgrades that we saw require a considerable depth of sediment and other additives for them to work. And so the very areas that we've identified as high-risk sites along the lagoon, in low-lying areas, close to the groundwater table, are, in many cases, the very sites where those drain field upgrades may not be appropriate, may not work, or you'd have to have an enormous mound system that people might not like. So that's going to pose a challenge to actually implementing the plan as written. Another challenge is that when we wrote the plan, the Department of Health had worked with the Department of Environmental Protection. They had installed a number of these in multiple places around the state. They had monitored them. They performed well. They were moving forward with amending the state rules to permit these things in an easier way. That process has hit multiple snafus, and so instead of that permitting process being in place, ready for us to use, it's not. It's held up in legal challenges, and so legally we can't permit this, we can't get permits to install the systems that were envisioned in the plan. So we're in a bit of a holding pattern right now, trying to figure out how the Department of Health solves their legal issues. We could shift to the use of these more advanced systems, but they do have maintenance, heavy maintenance requirements, and there are expenses, ongoing expenses associated with that. And so one thought is that people with fairly large homes on fairly small lots close to impaired waters are already required to have an aerobic system or an advanced system. Those systems that the state requires them to have don't necessarily reduce nitrogen. They have very similar maintenance costs and permitting and obligations, but without the nutrient removal benefits that we seek. So we may be able to upgrade the systems that are already out there so that they perform functions that we're interested in, and we're not obligating people to, you know, a higher level of maintenance and performance and cost. But we're going to have to shift up what's in the plan. One way or another, we're going to have to change it up.
And just a quick follow-up is I'm completely supportive of using every tool that's in the toolbox, and I absolutely believe this is a very applicable tool. Just remember, too, we are in a place where the lagoon has gotten to a situation that we're not satisfied with, and there's been many state laws in place while that happened. And if we want to rest the future of the lagoon on counting on Department of Health and other state laws to implement policies and requirements and compliance and all of those things that meet our objectives, then that's a decision. Whether it's under the advisement of this board and ultimately the decision of the county commission, then that's a decision. I don't agree with that decision, because I think there has to be something that promotes compliance very aggressively, that recognizes the amount of investment that the citizens throughout this community are making in restoring the lagoon. And so I won't go any farther than that, but it's just, I believe there is that enforcement, compliance, maintenance component to ensure that the work we're doing is sustainable over the long run.
Courtney?
Along that line, I will take it further. Is there a way that when, say, if we are looking at areas along the lagoon that fit into our high-risk areas that are clearly not suitable for central sewer, and this is the area that we're going to focus these systems on, if we use the tax to help put these in, can we use that, incentive as like an agreement where we require a certain maintenance standard in that agreement with the property owner? That maybe we could, like even an inspection requirement or something of that nature? Is that something we can look into? So if we're investing into these properties and helping people change, we can ensure that it's going to be maintained and for the long run? Is that something?
Legally, we can do that. The issue is then, 10 years from now, when we're no longer collecting the tax, who's going to enforce that? And, how are we going to? So we have to have a perpetual solution.
Right. And I think we need to look into that, like a long-term solution. If we can't depend on the state, which clearly we can't, how can we do that locally?
John?
The amount of money for the biannual or annual inspections and upgrades and cleaning of the filters and stuff is not a tremendous amount of money. In fact, it's just about what you would pay to be on central sewer or less. So I think we're over-focused on that. It was a fascinating thing, and there's probably some stuff that we can do relatively inexpensively to assist people along there, but if the plan was to try to move everybody to one of these new advanced systems, it's not a functional idea. Yeah.
Virginia, do you see anything in this discussion that you think should be part of our next recommendation to the County Commission regarding upgrades to the Lagoon plan, or is it not yet ripe?
I think we haven't found a clear path forward yet. So if there are any bright ideas of, what you think we should pursue or questions we should ask,
I've got a bright idea. Since you two can talk to each other all you want because you're in the same swim lane and don't violate sunshine, and since you obviously know more about it than most of us, and since you two are absolute experts on this, I would suggest that without formality, that there be an ongoing dialogue with the Director of Natural Resources and these two members of the committee, and come forward to us probably sometime this summer with an update on where we stand and any recommendations you may have. Is that satisfactory? You've both volunteered? Todd, we'll be all done with the Charter Review Committee in May, Todd. All right, is that a solution that rests for now? Okay, thank you. The next is County Commission action on cost share for substitute projects. There's no action required of us. The information is in our packet. Are there any questions? Thank you very much. You got to be quicker.
I was just saying great job to the staff for.
Say again?
Saying great job to the staff for presenting that well done at the County Commission. They passed it, so it's good.
Yeah, thank you. The train is leaving the station. We're moving.
Okay, go.
As a community. The next item is item C, County Commission action on sewage overflow issues. Virginia, let me give it contingency set. I've got a bunch of notes from her. A contingency set aside for pilot project. You go ahead and tell me what that means.
So the County Commission voted to move forward on a number of things, and you have each of those agenda items in your packet. Replacement of the force main that keeps failing, moving forward with smoke testing to identify private and public areas of failure, and they asked for staff to come back with a more comprehensive approach to addressing the problem. There was discussion about the appropriateness of using Lagoon tax dollars for helping the private citizens upgrade their systems. We've talked about that briefly here as well. And so as we are preparing the next update to the plan, it's sort of the chicken or the egg, the cart before the horse. If we don't set some funds aside through this January and February review process that go into that March revision to the plan, then dollars won't be there to help folks make those upgrades and repairs. Ideally, we would want to see the results of the smoke testing to see how big the problem is, to figure out how we develop something to address that. But if we wait 6 to 9 months to have the results of the smoke testing, we'll have missed a whole year cycle in our planning and funding. So my thought was, if you want to direct us to come up with some dollar amount that we say this might be used for this purpose, subject to the results of smoke testing, we could do that and then come back to you later when we have that information to flush it out.
What size package are you talking about?
840,000.
Yes, please?
I would move that we set aside that amount of money for future projects. It just seems prudent to do that now, and then that way we have it if we need it, and we don't have to readdress this.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and second. Discussion, please. You.
Yeah, and I would concur with that. It seems like we're getting more funds than we had anticipated, so that would probably be an appropriate use for those funds.
Yes, please, Courtney.
I just wanted to make sure, do I need to abstain since Satellite Beach will be the city that is going to be the pilot? It might be a good idea for me to allow him to vote instead. Okay.
Yes, Sean.
I'm looking forward to seeing the results. I don't want to wait a year. I just want to clarify that if the results don't justify that the money is set aside, but it doesn't mean we're going to spend it.
Right.
Correct. We will come back to you with a plan, whether it's 50% cost share or 100% cost share.
Or zero if it doesn't
Whether
work.
it's got caps on individual properties or, how that would work. But it's just hard to develop that till we know the scale of the problem out there.
We have a motion to set aside 800, to put into the next year Lagoon plan contingency fund, $840K sitting there for application to the results of the study that's going on right now on sewer. Is there any public comment? All right, I've stated the motion. We have a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Anything else on this?
Nope.
That makes you smile?
Yes.
Great
Yes,
job
sir.
to the staff, too.
I wanted to make a couple of comments that were more generic about the sewage issue. One of them was there were quite a few speakers, and there have been quite a few news articles over the years, but quite a few speakers in the last few weeks who have said things that aren't really substantiated with fact. And so the idea that the lagoon is full of antibiotics, personal care products, herbicides, diabetic medications, hormones, and lots of other things, there's no data to support that. Logically, it makes sense that if it goes into the wastewater stream and it finds its way to the, out to the lagoon, it'll be there. But there's no data to support that. The other thing is that there was an awful lot of criticism of picking on nitrogen as the metric for the lagoon when there are these other myriad of problems that we have that aren't documented. So I want people to know that when you take nitrogen out, you can't get it out all by itself. In fact, I would challenge you to come up with a method for removing nitrogen that doesn't affect bacteria, that doesn't affect suspended sediments, that doesn't affect phosphorus, it doesn't affect the conservation of water. There are lots of other benefits that come with nitrogen, using nitrogen as the metric. It's just one metric. We've chosen it. It's a good metric, I think. But don't lose sight of the fact when we get yelled at by the public that you people are wasting our time just focusing on nitrogen. It's okay to focus on nitrogen. Those are my two comments. Thanks.
I've listened to Dr. DeFries say that it is a useful but imperfect metric. I wonder if since we're going to crack open the Lagoon plan anyway, that it might not be useful to put a paragraph in there that basically says what Dr. Windsor just said, to note that there are other noxious substances that are removed through the nitrogen phosphorus removal technology, because it's unaddressed, I think.
I think it's in there if you read it and put it all together, but nobody sits down and reads the whole document and puts it all together. They read a certain page or a certain paragraph. And so, yeah.
Without a motion, could you think about that? Chuck is next.
Yeah, I just wanted to parallel this. I did a study down maybe 12, 15 years ago. I used it in one of my classes where they looked at issues, environmental issues, and compared to the public's concern versus the scientists' concern. And the public was usually concerned with things that were really close to their house, like a hazardous waste dump or a solid waste landfill. And, you know, that had an immediate effect on that population. But the scientists were more concerned about more global concerns, like climate change. And I see this issue kind of similar because nobody wants sewage outfall right in their backyard, understand. But, you know, the big thing that we're trying to focus on is cleaning up the entire lagoon. So I think we got to kind of look at that from the scientific approach, that, you know, look at the big picture, make sure we don't lose focus on really what our objectives are.
I'm on John's side on this, but I want to take his argument and turn it around, because the fact that there's lack of evidence that there are fecal matter, or other pathogens in the water, there's lack of evidence that they aren't. So what I would propose is we put some action in the plan to actually gather this data that's missing.
I just have one of the things that some of the speakers said at the meeting that I think was not wrong, but what reflected some misunderstanding is that there was an idea that the county was responsible for all of the discharges throughout the whole county, and then not understanding that there are other sewer utilities throughout the county. And so the county has addressed theirs through their action items, but they're a percentage of what the whole is. And so I was wondering if we wanted to invite some of the other utilities to at least send us a memo or some documentation of what they're doing to address their discharges throughout the county. Because that would give us a whole picture instead of just focusing on Brevard County, which is literally a percentage of what's actually going on throughout the whole county.
I wonder if this might not be a good post-winter, spring hoo-ha time, a good topic for a whole meeting to get at least a sampling and so on. Anyone have thoughts on that? Let's do it.
Well, to additive that, I absolutely support that. When we do that, to the data comment, I would definitely like to make sure that we cover the loading that has come from these events and understand the magnitude and the implication to the lagoon of these issues, because I think they're a pinpoint in time, they are intense. How you put that into context to some of these contributors that are 24/7, year after year, and it is, I think, very important so that we get to the science. There's zero question that the sewage spill issues needs to be under control. The level of impact to the lagoon and how it gets handled and where it gets handled, whether it's how much of it relates on this community versus how much it relates just to utilities improving the way they operate, is important.
Courtney.
I think and I don't know how we could go about this, but if we did get the data, I think it'd be very important that we use a third party, just as a trust if with the community if we were to get that data. And I don't know, who that party would be, but, if that's a huge concern and that's going to be brought up over and over and over again every time we have this discussion with the community, we might want to get that, and just deal with it and get that data done.
Virginia, do you feel you have adequate guidance without a motion to, one, take a look at saying something about other noxious substances and how they piggyback on nitrogen phosphorus removal, and secondly, for teeing up a meeting sometime after we're done with the Lagoon Plan update to deal with sewer issues? Yes. You happy with that? Okay, comment please.
The problem with trying to generate data on spillage is that you are going to have to measure it when it occurs. And so we've already missed that window at this point. It's happened, the spillage has occurred. I mean, it's possible to go back and look at what the levels are now, but we have no baseline of what they were before. And so that's going to make it difficult until the next event occurs. And so I think it's going to be difficult for us to generate any meaningful data for a while. But I also think that whatever best practices the county determines for the areas that they know that they have problems, those need to be shared with the other municipal partners who have sewage systems that we know also had spillage issues, and say, these are what we've determined are going to be best practices, and maybe they can come back to us and request funds to meet their needs as well at some point in time in the future.
John?
So it just struck me, we had the gentleman from the county utilities here, and you're right, it's only one of 13 or 14 different systems in the county. And when we asked how much nitrogen directly related to that spill and all the infiltration, the number was around 1,800 pounds. And I kind of went, whew, that's no big deal. However, it just occurred to me, there's 13 other systems. I know the city of Cocoa has done an aggressive job doing repairs and things, but all of those spills, what we never got, because county didn't have that information, they provided what they had, what we didn't get was a cumulative of all the spills from all the things, and I do think it's within our purview to request from the cities or Department of Environmental Regulation, who gets all these reports, some type of a how much occurred during that in nitrogen, how much was thrown into the system during that storm event. It also gives us, it does give us a baseline for future, and to say these are best practices that the county utilities are putting in place, that the cities are putting in place, so that we can see that there's progress or not.
David? Comment?
No. Just to tag on to that, I agree with that. DEP does collect all that data. Every utility is required to report every overflow that they have with an estimate of volume. I do respectfully disagree on the data. I think the nitrogen loading in wastewater is well documented, and additionally, numerous utilities during these spill events collected nitrogen samples of the spill event. So I actually do think that data is, if not perfect, it is readily available and close enough.
And while the utility collects the sample, they send it to a third-party lab for analysis.
That's correct. And then the other piece of this is we just mentioned DEP several times. I think when we have that follow-up meeting, my guess is that DEP Central District would not have any opposition to providing some of that, their assessment of what that quantities, they're going to stick to facts, they're not going to be opinions, but I think they would be more than happy to help serve in a little bit of that third-party role of the data that they've accumulated and some of their observations from a mass loading and what they are doing as the cognizant regulatory agency over the sewer utilities in this area that we may or may not be aware of.
Yeah, the analysis I'd give is basically the question of the governmental bodies that deal with this is A, what we're doing now, okay, and B, should we be creating new resources to deal with what is seeming to be a larger problem? The other side of the table is the public, which would like to advance the counsel of perfection. The right amount of stuff going in the river is zero, and it ought to cost very little. So I think we will do a great service to the community writ large by presenting the factual information as it ripens a bit into the spring and summer. This is an important thing. Yes?
And I'm not an expert on data collection or anything by any means, but I think my point is that when we asked the county to come in with a solution, the county utility department has done a great job in creating their solutions, but they are only one little part of the whole. And unless we ask the rest of the utilities what they're doing, we don't know how they're solving their problems or if they are. And so, maybe by just asking the question will spur that, action. So that was my point, was trying to see, how we can get them on board and get the information to the public that it's being solved countywide, because we can't say that right now.
We're going to have to constrain the time on that since, what are the 16 municipalities, if we give them each 15 minutes.
Well, yeah, but can we formally send a memo to the municipalities that have utility systems requesting documentation or information about any spillages that they had during the Irma event and how they are addressing those, and then have just a compilation reported back to the committee.
Virginia, do you need motion input to do that?
Do you want that memo to come from staff, or do you want that memo to come from the chair?
I think the chair.
From the chair, so we need a.
Could you prepare a draft
We
and
can
present
draft.
it to the person who's not here today?
Yes.
And the committee? Is that set? All right, yeah, Courtney, you have anything?
No, I think that's.
All right, I'll accept public comment. We don't have a proposal before the body, but yes,
I would
please.
just like to add in that we were at the festival in Satellite Beach shortly after the whole sewage release debacle. Every single person who came to talk to the Indian River Lagoon Coalition was really upset about the sewage release. And I think the sooner you can ask for this information and get it out there, the better it's going to be. I know the data's out there because I've talked to people who have gotten it, so I don't think it's going to be all that difficult. But I think the sewage release issue is becoming conflated with the lagoon tax, and I think you need to be really smart about how you talk about that. So I just wanted to give you that input that we got, because the question is, so how much sewage, and that's not the word they used, is acceptable to float by my dock? So it's a very emotional issue for the community, and so I think just remember that as you think about how to communicate it back to people. It's not just technical.
And identify yourself.
Marilyn Waters with the Indian River Lagoon Coalition.
Yes, thank you. It sounds like April if you think you can get there.
To have them come in and speak, but
Yeah.
the memo would be much sooner.
Yes. Over here, anything? Yes, sir.
Quick comment. One of the things people kept talking about, essentially turds floating by their docks, and a recent comment from actually a maintenance guy on the county infrastructure said, you know, the pumps grind that stuff up so fine that, I mean, he just basically expressed disbelief that there was any solid matter. I mean, yes, there may have been odors and so on. And so just sort of point of information or maybe a question, does anybody actually see, you know?
Only when the manatees are in my canal.
Because they bring their own, create their own.
And only in the good old days in Navy ports.
It can recoagulate.
All right, all right. You have a comment?
I just, I reviewed all of the reports that all of the cities had submitted to the state, in addition to the one submitted by the county. And I don't know what their nutrient concentration was of all the city releases, but the county was responsible for more than half of, so just to, put it in perspective, yes, there are city issues out there, but they're not 13 times the county problem. They're less than, in some, they are less than what the county problem was, as reported.
Well, one of the things that ought to be part of this is a tally of how much money is currently in place or allocated to this. When Courtney and I took a look at what Cocoa Beach and Satellite Beach are doing probably a year and a half ago, I think we found $32 million teed up. That's not appreciated by the public, and that's just two small cities. So I think a dollar tally of what there is. And I will also say that I absolutely echo what Marilyn Waters said about the danger of conflating let's fix wastewater problems with let's use Lagoon Trust Fund money to fix wastewater problems is something to be worried about. Virginia and I exchanged public records emails and on this, and for I think excellent reasons. It's not a topic of discussion today, but your point is very well taken. Charles?
Yeah, I was just curious, Virginia, did the information that you looked at include anything from the Air Force Station?
Where's their sewage go? They don't have a sewage treatment
not that I
Well,
recall.
Canaveral has a sewage treatment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they pump the port and a lot of
Right to the pool.
Yeah,
And KSC.
and I don't think there's any discharge from the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. I had a small sewer plant there, but it doesn't discharge there, and so on.
It's a pretty big plant now because it does take care of all the center. I don't know if that's just something to
Yeah.
need to consider.
Let's not forget the feds.
Right.
They own a lot of territory, 140,000 acres at north end of the Indian River Lagoon and the Patrick Air Force Base. Anything else on this subject? You have adequate guidance, Virginia, without a motion. Thank you so much. Let's move on to the next item of business, substitute project review checklist in short form. We had concerned ourselves in the past, and Virginia, you tell me if I got this wrong, we have concerned ourselves in the past with trying to uncomplicate the checklist for substitute projects coming in so that we didn't have to bounce them back as we did last year, et cetera. And there has been a short form checklist created. It's in our package. Virginia, let me give you the floor if you want to say anything on this.
Yeah, so the committee had asked, could we have a checklist so that at a quick glance you could see whether the applications were complete and reasonable. And so that's what we've tried to create. If there's anything that you want different on this form, now would be the time to let us know because those applications are coming in on Monday. So we will begin using a checklist for that. The other issue was the short form. The committee had asked whether instead of getting the entire application package, if that could be shortened to the parts that were relevant to the committee in combination with the checklist. So we're getting a lot more information from applicants. If there's any of that you want on this checklist or on the short form, you can let us know now, or you can let us know by Monday.
Well, let me suggest two things. If someone has comments directly on this now, we'll take them. If you didn't really look at this and understand what the tasking was, you got the weekend to do that, and you have her email address, and if you don't send it to other members of the committee, then you won't break any laws.
Correct.
How's that? So let's call that homework, please. Let's all look at that. If there's any way on God's green earth to avoid a 249-page agenda package, I would love to do that. That was February, right? Anything else on this? All right. Next item, new business. Dylan Hanson, you got something to say on video outreach, or is there something to say? Yes?
Yeah, we have two videos that for 2 meetings now kind of got pushed, and so
Well, we absolutely want to see them.
All right.
So with your permission, we went ahead and posted these, so they're up on our Facebook.
Oh, the projector is terrible. Turns everything blue.
Today, we're out here with Brevard Zoo's Restore Shores team with tons of community volunteers and our partners over at Brevard County Natural Resource Management. Today, we're building an oyster reef, and an oyster reef is good for so many things. 3 important details, though, to really take note is that oysters filter the lagoon so they can clean a lot of that nutrients out that we have way too much of. They're really good at shoreline stabilizers, so they protect our shoreline from these waves that come in that are strong. And then thirdly, they offer habitat for hundreds of animals that live out there in the lagoon. So by building these oyster reefs that are missing in our county that was here once before, hopefully we'll be able to bring the lagoon back to what it once was. This is not going to fix the lagoon all by itself, but we're hoping it'll be one of the tools in the toolbox to bring our lagoon back to a healthy ecosystem.
We're here at Kiwanis Park at Geiger Point. We're building an oyster reef today. It is the biggest oyster reef that we have built so far in Brevard County. It's over 1,000 feet in length. So oysters provide a lot of bioremediation benefits. Not only do they filter the water and improve water clarity, but oyster reefs also provide a perfect environment for something called denitrification to happen, which is a process where microorganisms in the water use nitrogen in respiration and actually convert it to an inert nitrogen gas, and it bubbles right out of the system. So we're exporting nitrogen out of the system. And why do we want to do that? Because Nitrogen and phosphorus, they feed algae and have been the source of these algae blooms that have been plaguing the lagoon for so many years. So we are installing oyster reefs to improve water quality in the lagoon.
So this is a pilot for the
We are here at Chain of Lakes
septic
Park in
upgrades.
Brevard County. What we have here is a passive on-site treatment system, POTS for short. And really the purpose of these is to reduce the nutrients going into our local waterways here in Brevard County. Conventional septic systems aren't designed to remove the nutrients, so we need to do something additional to go ahead and remove that extra nitrogen and phosphorus. Here behind us, we have the septic tank where the wastewater will go in from the home, goes into the pump tank and then into the top zone of our pot system where the nitrification process will take place. It then drops down a transfer point and it goes out, it goes through our Bolden Gold where the denitrification takes place and out into the conventional drain field that you see here.
We know that the drain fields introduce a lot of pollutants like nitrogen into the groundwater, which is obviously bad for the inner lagoon. The buildup of the nutrients causes a lot of algae growth, and eventually if you get too much of that, excessive amounts, you end up killing fish, other wildlife, seagrass, and macroinvertebrates that live in the inner lagoon.
The main magic of the pot system is the Bolden Gold that's in the anaerobic chamber. And what that's made out of is expanded clay and tire crumb, and really that just provides the environment for the bacteria to live and be happy and denitrify. The top zone of the system is just like any other conventional drainage system. It's just an aerobic process where nitrification can take place with a coarse material for the microbes to live. And then the Bolden Gold is intended to last the lifetime of the conventional drain field, anywhere from 15 to 25 years depending.
So we're producing these little videos monthly now to try to get information out, communicate what sort of projects are going on that are funded with the lagoon dollars.
We have YouTube channel, and we've discussed in the past the various presentations that we've received over the past year as being awful good tutorials, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes. Are these teed up anywhere?
We haven't been able to do that splice and dice exercise that you asked us to do, but that's on Brandon's.
Thank you. Please report when that gets done. Yeah. All right, moving on to new item B, broadening lagoon education. And the first is a desire by Virginia to have someone from this panel be a member of the selection committee for looking at the RFQs. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Brian, you have the floor.
So we've put out this, or we're going to put out this RFQ to address the concerns, or the direction from the committee to expand our outreach beyond what was in the plan initially. So we've changed the language to broaden that, to expand that out. It also is going to combine with the Blue Life program in our stormwater department, so that will help leverage additional money to make it more attractive to firms to bid on, as well as be able to leverage more grant funds by combining the two. And we've put in the RFQ language that will focus on community-based marketing strategies so that we can look at those as well, which hadn't necessarily been looked at as heavily in the past. So we would like to see if anyone from the committee would be on. Normally, we would have a committee that would be just 3 members from different departments within the county. And in order to expand the committee, we thought we should have some representatives from at least the city, since they are participating in the Blue Life program. And we have to go before the commission to do that, though, to be able to expand it up past that number of 3. And we thought for the 5th person, it would be good to have someone from this committee also serve on that.
How many buys do you want?
Well,
Uno?
Yeah.
How many would choose to volunteer for that? 1, 2, 3. Oh, we got We got a problem here.
Let me say that the selection process, we have no idea how many proposals we will get, but they're quite lengthy. So you're talking about fairly large volume, potentially, of materials to review. We shortlist the applicants, and then we typically invite them in for, say, 20-minute presentations. So there could be, several hours of hearing presentations from the top-ranked firms, and then we plan to select multiple firms based on what sort of skill sets they bring to the table, so that we have all the skill sets we want. So I appreciate the level of interest. I just wanted you to understand the workload associated.
Let me ask one question and then offer a process to decide where we cut the baby. Is there anyone on this panel who intends to bid, be one of the bidders? None. Thank you. That makes life a lot easier. Let me give, we had 3 hands up. Let me give you each 30 seconds to say why you should be selected.
I would defer to John Windsor if he's
We have 2
interested in
folks
that.
here. David?
John does a lot. Was your hand up, John, to volunteer, or was it to ask a question?
I wanted to go to the bathroom. No, it was to volunteer, and it was because I'm not sure if anybody else has ever been involved in one of these RFQ processes. I have for the county dredging contractors, and so I understand it took probably a week of my time to review all the proposals, get down to a narrow list, and then it was another day to go through the contractors, and then follow-up meetings to decide which ones to short list. And so it's not an insignificant amount of time. I am retired, and so I know some of you other folks actually have to go out and make money to support yourselves. I'm available, but, if somebody else is dying to do it,
Let me ask the question again. How many volunteers do we have?
Good question.
By acclamation, can we designate John? By acclamation, you're in.
Thank you.
Does that answer this question? Thank you.
Wait, before Brandon steps down. So, a couple of things on here, and I really like what you've put into the RFQ. In particular, the first section, to maximize public awareness and to motivate and engage community members, okay? On the second page, collecting and recording metrics, some focus on that. This is a marketing campaign. I'm from sales. We know how to measure things. Marketing is very difficult. And also to develop with critical target populations, and I want to refer to the research that was done in Alachua County. The critical target population may well be county employees who are influential in a positive way if they're following this program. So I want to know how they're going to collect the metrics here. What are we going to call success? Alachua County said awareness went from, 29 to 60%. That's cool, but did it do anything? Because I don't want to spend money, any amount, if we're not actually getting an impact, a measurable, demonstrable impact.
Yeah, this goes to my real concern about this whole trust fund effort. We've got good money set aside to get bad stuff out of the lagoon. We've got good money set aside to keep the bad stuff out of the lagoon. And 10 years from now, it'll be all wasted unless we accomplish this third thing, which is to change lifestyles, change personal life philosophies, and this goes to that. And I would suggest we don't ignore what I think is the most important target population, because they will have the most influence inside families, and that's kids in school. And I've spoken both publicly and privately in favor of making lagoon studies an element of Brevard Public Schools STEM and STEAM work. I think it should be a primary focus, and I would hope that in evaluating these that you would add extra points if they say we're going to get inside kids' heads. Because 10 years from now, those kids are going to be voters. 10 years from now, they're the ones that are going to be carrying forward the effort that we're at the beginning of. Anything else on this? Is the pot right? Okay, thank you. The next item is number 2 on this list for broadening lagoon education. It's a staff report on grass clippings, say that fast 3 times, and there's no action required of us. This is just background for the next item. Please.
All right, I'm Anthony Gubler. I was working under Virginia. We had some a radio spot and a YouTube clip, a TV spot that Alachua County made up as part of their grass clippings program. So we thought it'd be interesting item for y'all to listen to and watch. So this is the radio spot here.
He was a good blade of grass with a bright green future ahead of him. He was the blade of grass next door. He was full of nutrients, and everyone thought his clippings would go on to nourish the yard. But when he was mowed, the clippings were left in the road. Even grass this good will end up a nuisance to society when left to a life on the streets. The clippings eventually flow into storm drains where they can gang up and cause flooding. Or they'll end up in a body of water where they break down and become harmful, algae-growing, sunlight-blocking, fish-killing water polluters. This is happening in neighborhoods all across America. Don't let this happen to your good grass blades. Don't leave them to a life on the streets. Mow with your chute facing away from the street and blow your clippings back onto the yard where they can nourish the lawn and the soil. Join professional landscapers Alachua County, Gainesville, and the DOT in our joint effort to keep grass off the streets. For more information, visit alachuacountywater.org.
And here's a little TV spot.
You don't have to be a lawn care professional like me to know that leaving clippings in the road looks bad. But did you know that it's bad for our creeks and lakes? Clippings and other yard debris flow through storm drains to the nearest body of water. Then they break down and release nutrients. This fuels algae growth that blocks sunlight and chokes out plants and fish. So get those clippings back onto the grass where they can provide beneficial nutrients to the soil. It's better for the grass, better for the environment, and it prevents clogged storm drains and flooding. Join us in the effort to keep grass off the streets.
Yeah, so back to their argument about, can we measure this? And Alachua County found out it was fairly hard to measure and get quantitatively the impact. But what they do social surveys, they found a big impact. And so when they would reinitiate this program, which started in 2011, 2012, they would, there are ordinance folks that would go around and document wherever they saw grass clippings in the streets. They would see a market decrease afterwards. And, and with this educational program, it was very easy to recommunicate why it was important to keep these grass clippings off. So one of the reasons we are bringing this program to your attention is because Leesa with MRC is talking about helping us coordinate with other counties and hopefully share some of the costs in the social marketing. We'd still have to pay for our own radio spot or marketing materials if we wanted to, and there's more examples on the table over there of different types of materials. But at least when we're talking about focus groups and social marketing, we can share the costs and hopefully not fund the whole thing ourselves.
Question, a primary target's got to be people that own grass blowers.
Mm-hmm.
And they're, 87,000 commercial firms, guys that mow your lawn. Do we have any way to, A, identify who they are through business tax receipts and so on, and B, to make them a special target?
Right, so we can look at those business licenses in Brevard.
Yeah, it's got to be city licenses too.
Well, they have
And all
to have
the cities
they have to have a county license, so that'll capture everybody.
Do you need a county
Don't they?
license to have a business in Cocoa Beach that mows lawns? I don't think so. You just need a BTR.
You need a county and city.
There is a county license? Okay, so we have access to it. Thank you. Any questions okay?
Just, John, to say real quick, in the marketing and ad, as John was saying, there's an awareness campaign that changes awareness, and there's an action campaign. And I think the way that Gainesville did it is they may have a focus grouped to ask awareness, which is good,
but they also looked at activities and actions. And that, in my opinion, is the number that matters most. And they didn't rely on somebody saying, yes, I do it. They had a third party go out and check it. So I think when in these RFQs and the companies that come forward, I think it will be important, like everyone was saying, to prioritize people that are looking to do metrics on actions, not just awareness.
Anything else, Tony? You happy? Virginia? All right. Let's move on to the action part of this item. There is a grass clipping campaign request, and I'm going to ask two people to talk. First, Leesa, and if we have questions, we can ask them. Then I'd like Virginia to talk about the money side of this, if we were to think of this favorably. Leesa, good morning. Happy Christmas.
Everybody. Happy holidays.
Yes.
So glad to be back. Thank you for inviting me to come back again.
Introduce yourself, please.
Sure. My name is Dr. Leesa Souto. I'm the Executive Director of Marine Resources Council. We're a charitable organization that's been striving to protect and restore the Indian River Lagoon since the early 80s. We operate out of the Ted Moorhead Lagoon House, located at 3275 Dixie Highway Northeast in Palm Bay. Thank you. That's perfect. I'm going to talk to you today. I think there's a lot of confusion about what community-based social marketing or what social marketing is, so I want to start out with a little bit of an overview of that and set the stage for providing a little bit more information on what they did in Gainesville in Alachua County. And Uppercase Inc. was the marketing firm that did the Alachua County work, and they were the firm also that came in and did the two-day community assembly that we did at the Lagoon House in August. Dorian Morgan, my good friend and colleague. I also have to credit her for giving me some of these slides. Before I came to MRC, I was part of the engineering department at UCF, Stormwater Management Academy, which are the genius engineers who did things like Bold and Gold and came up with a lot of the green infrastructure, BMPs, and those metrics for how do you measure these engineering projects to figure out how much really of an impact they're having on the environment. I was the only ecologist there because they knew that there was a need to address a source, that they were not going to be able to clean up everything as long as there was going to be continued, each of us is a source of pollution, right? So they brought me in to come up with metrics of how do we measure an effective source removal from each individual person. How do you effectively evaluate education and social marketing programs to determine that there's been an impact on environmental quality? So that's been my research goal. It was my research goal the 11 years I was there. That's what I did my dissertation research on, and that's why I'm really delighted to be able to bring that to the East Coast where we haven't done a lot of it. So fortunately, the task force that I assembled for those 11 years included people like Stacy Greco, Alachua County, Dorian Morgan, she was at the time with Southwest Florida Water Management District, the TAP program, Tallahassee, and those people have led the research, and we have examples. So we can build on what other people have done, which is why we can sit here and look at Alachua County's research, use some of their metrics and some of their ideas, and bring them here and kind of augment them. All right, so what is it? It really, maybe social marketing was a disservice to call it marketing, because a lot of people think it's just marketing. All you have to do is get a bunch of media out there, and that's what you're doing. But what it really is applying the marketing research techniques to identify your target audiences, like were described earlier. Really understand who you're dealing with and what are they thinking, so you can talk to them in a language that resonates with them, and you can overcome what's preventing them from doing the behavior. Unfortunately, we're in about 40 years of environmental ed. There's a disconnect. What you learn in school in 4th grade does not necessarily reciprocate throughout adulthood. We have to remind people as adults, remember you learned this in 4th grade, you were supposed to not pollute? Well, you're an adult now and you have a responsibility to do that. But you have to overcome what's keeping them from doing the activity, because they kind of know. They've already learned. They've heard about it in school for 40 years now. They kind of know it's back there somewhere. Something happened in adulthood that prevents them from doing what they should be doing. So it's figuring out what that is. And it's really behavior specific. And the goal ultimately is behavior change. It's action. So we're trying to get people to do, not just say they do or think they do or want to do, but actually doing it. So these are the steps. I don't have time to go through all of them. But it's really about, part of it is selecting the behavior, and I do want to touch on that a bit. Ideally, you want to select the behavior because it has the greatest impact on the environmental quality, and it's going to be the easiest one. It's your lowest hanging fruit, ideally, and it's going to have the greatest impact on reducing the amount of pollution. That takes research. You have to figure that out. That's pretty extensive research. So it's often convenience to select the behavior, and that's what, when, really the decision to focus on grass clippings was really a convenience decision. But you do this barriers and benefits research, you have to identify your strategy, and then test it in a small market before you spend your $500,000 to do a big campaign. Test it small, and then you refine it, because it may turn out to be a disaster, and you don't want to spend $500,000 and realize, oh, that was a disaster. And then you implement and you refine and so on. It kind of becomes this adaptive management sort of a tool. There's examples, a lot of it in public health: tobacco, AIDS, obesity, teen pregnancy, TB, preventing injuries. Public health has all the money in the world to do social marketing. Preventing injuries, traffic collisions, seat belts, right? That was a big social marketing campaign that was successful. Contributing to community and social values. Spaying and neutering your pets, volunteering crime prevention, and so on. More recently, Doug McKenzie Moore brought community-based social marketing into the environmental realm, and it's been utilized, and CBSM is his website. He's got a lot of examples of it on his website. He really focuses on climate change. There's a lot of climate change social marketing work that's been done: water conservation, air quality, habitat protection. Non-point source, the realm that we're working in, is really the toughest one, because you've got this aggregate source of pollution that's coming in from everywhere. But by far, this reduction of tobacco use, this tremendous reduction. I mean, if you go back to the 1940s, over half the population was smoking. In the year 2000, 23%. That's when they started the Truth Campaign. And now 7% of people are smoking cigarettes in the United States, which is pretty amazing. Social marketing. All right, at the assembly that we held in August, which was our 16th assembly, we had 51 Lagoon-wide educators, and Uppercase Inc., the people who did the Alachua County Grass Clippings campaign, and many others, led social marketing exercises. Some of the outcomes of that assembly included a committee formed. People wanted to start a Lagoon-wide, all 5-county committee of educators and communicators who would be willing to partner to do the research. And they wanted to create an inventory of projects. We want to know what's being done out there and how people are doing it. And they wanted to pursue grass clippings, the research, not because it had been determined that it was the most polluting behavior, like the ideal, but because nobody was doing it, and it kind of gave everybody a starting point that we could all get together on and share the research, and everybody kind of needed it. There was a need for it, they saw. And everybody knew that it was a problem that they were seeing grass clippings on their streets. What's the problem with grass clippings? Not only do they degrade in the lagoon and cause nitrogen, problems with fish kills and algae blooms and so on, but they also are a problem for flooding. They clog our storm drains, and they can lead to maintenance, increased costs in maintenance. I'll never forget, it was actually Tropical Storm Faye. I had a business on Babcock Street, and I was going to check on my business after the storm, and there were cars topped over with water, and there was a poor guy with a rake at the storm drain trying to unclog it from the pine needles. I was like, that poor city worker out there with a rake trying to solve this major flooding problem, and it was because of really not grass clippings but pine needles left in the street. And it does create a hazard for especially motorcycles and cyclists who can slip sideways on grass clippings and leaf debris. And the regulations that are in place aren't working. They are really kind of a soft approach. Nobody's enforcing them. Typically, there might be a warning given, and if it's a repeat offender, they would get a fine, but nobody's really tracking who's a repeat offender. Also, it's hard to catch them because they will, you're not sure if they're going to come back and blow the clippings later. So you just see them in the street, and the guy's still working. Is he going to come back and blow them back? So somebody has to sit there and watch to make sure they're going to do it. So the approach has been to use education or soft tool to try to prevent people from doing the activity. All right, the same was the case in Alachua County. So the next couple of slides are going to talk a little bit in more detail about this great campaign that was done there. And what they decided the same thing. Education was needed. This is their logo. They focused on, well, let me start from the beginning. Okay, the goals were to reduce the amount of grass clippings and leaves in the street. The behavior specifically is to blow the clippings back onto the grass. So they don't want them to bag them up. They don't want them to blow them somewhere else. They want them to go back onto the grass.
So and this is public roadways, those pictures. That appears to be at least on the right.
Yeah, I would assume so.
Yeah, so that's county problem, not private individual.
City
problem.
All right-of-ways are city and county owned, or state owned. It's usually, unless it's a major road, like a collector or a higher road, it's the responsibility of the property owner in front of the property to maintain that right of way.
There's a road going on both sides of this picture on the right-hand side.
That is a median.
Oh, the median, oh, I'm sorry, yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
I was referring to the median.
Yes, sir, yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I thought.
No, because Alachua addresses that later.
Right.
Real
Yeah,
positively.
We're going to get to that. That's a good point. Okay. The target audiences that they discovered from there, they did observational studies, and that's one of the research tools that we want to use in Martin County, is to go around and figure out who's really doing this and get a better understanding of who's doing it, the professionals or the homeowners. And part of that is just knowing who mows their lawn, which we don't have those data either. So we're going to have to just drive around and try to figure that out. So they selected in Alachua that they were going to focus on lawn care professionals as their primary audience because they assumed that that would be the greatest impact based on the number of people who were hiring professionals to do their lawn care. The homeowners were the secondary audience. Not only did they oversee and supervise and pay the professionals, but that they're taking care of their own yards in some cases, and that they wanted to create a social norm. A social norm is like what we are all influenced by the understanding that what we're doing is normal in society. We don't recognize it, we certainly don't admit it, but we are influenced, and that's what marketing is almost built on, is that you want to be like that person on the TV, so you're going to do what they do or you're going to buy what they buy. So a lot of this research was about trying to make this seem like the normal thing to do. What they found, which was interesting, and what John pointed out, is that the lawn care professionals, and this was a barrier, kept pointing at the government people. If they don't do it, I'm not going to do it. And there were a couple of things that Uppercase decided to do to respond to that, which I'll get into. But everybody had to agree. Everybody was going to do it. So if you're not doing it, you're not normal. You're not doing what everybody else is doing. Their tagline, keep grass off the streets. You heard the cute little radio thing, it was a good blade of grass, and then it hit the streets, and now it's, become a problem. So they had some assumptions, and the assumptions, and this is typical of environmental educators, is if we just ask them, they'll change. Or if we regulate them, they'll change. Or, if we do the poor children of the future are going to suffocate, they're not going to be able to use the lagoon, they'll change. And it turns out that doing the research with the professionals, that was not their most influential message that they wanted to hear. Their number one motivator for change was that they wanted to look professional. So that's why in the Alachua County video and the radio spot, again, we're professionals. We don't leave a mess like this behind. You'll see in some of their printed materials that that's their tagline, be a professional, don't leave a mess. This is not a professional way to behave. Their least likely thing that they said was the environment. They didn't really think that was a big motivator for them. Maybe they didn't understand the context. They didn't believe the connection. I mean, you're not sure why. But that message just didn't resonate. And that's really a disservice we do to ourselves all the time because we are of that mindset. We think everybody's that mindset. Just tell them the environment is going to suffer and they'll change. It's not necessarily the case. The big barrier that we talked about earlier is that they kept pointing. If they can point at somebody else, they will. Well, I don't have to do it because they're not doing it. They have the county or the city has way more roads than we do. They're not doing it. Why do we have to do it? So, Uppercase had to get everybody on the same page. They didn't realize, they were like, all right, Alachua County, first of all, you can't be the messenger. You can't be the one to tell them to do it because they don't think you're doing it. And you're going to have to do this too. So they realized there was another part of the campaign they were going to have to address. These are some examples of some of the good things they did. This one in the bottom right corner is an example of something that they attempted and failed, the little glove. They thought, another point about social marketing or any marketing is the closer you can get your reminder to do the action to the action itself, the better. That just makes sense. You remind somebody at the point of sale, don't buy this fertilizer. You remind somebody when they're doing the work, blow your grass clippings back. The little glove says, these hands keep grass off the streets. They thought it was brilliant. They went and gave it to the lawn care professionals. They were like, we don't use gloves. So before they invested, $50,000 in gloves, they're like, we don't use gloves, they're too hot. So, again, test your products, make sure that, what your strategy is that you think is brilliant with your little team around the table. Go give it to your target audience, and they'll be like, maybe. But so there's that part of it, too. This is another area of research. This is where your focus groups come in. You take your pieces out there, and you give them to your target audience, and you say, what do you think about this message? What do you think about this tool? What do you think about this strategy? what resonates with you? And then they let you know. I don't have to play these because you just heard them, but this was an example of the TV and the radio ads. They did do some good evaluation, social research. Again, you can't really link that your campaign specifically to a behavior if you can't demonstrate that they heard your campaign. So the first step is, did they receive the campaign? Did the majority of people understand, the message? Did they receive it? So that they heard the campaign on the radio. I could talk more in detail about how they were so successful at getting the campaign heard. I don't know how much time I have, so I'll leave time for questions. But that they were seeing the materials, and they were evaluated their behavior change. There were a series of questions. Were they blowing the grass clippings into the yard? They saw a 79% increase. It's always good to try to trick them with a reverse question where you're blowing clippings in the middle of the road. They had a 33% increase in the number of people who said they never did that, which was 95% never did it at the end of the campaign. Blowing clippings into the storm drain, 95% never did it at the end of the campaign. Knowledge, evaluating your change in knowledge, whether they understood the evaluation, the environmental impact, it increased. If they knew that there was a connection between grass clippings and the local water body, that increased. So they were increasing knowledge, so eventually maybe they would understand better the environmental impact of that action. The other thing that they did, and this was actually part of a bigger survey that Alachua County would do just to collect information from their public on what they thought was contributing the most pollution to surface water bodies in Alachua County. This was one of many questions that they asked do you think that grass clippings are contributing to water pollution in Alachua County? They started the campaign in 2011. They stopped it in 2014. And you see that, so this is data from 2013, 14, 15, 16. They ran the grass clippings campaign 2013. The public, so 43% of the residents of Alachua County agreed that grass clippings were contributing to water pollution. They didn't run it in 2014. They already forgot. So they dropped 12% of the people forgot what they learned the year before, or 12% of people came in, or there were new students that year, et cetera. For whatever reason, there was a significant drop in the number of people when they didn't run the campaign in 2014. Alachua County, our friend Stacy Greco there was like, oh my gosh, start the campaign back up again. Started it back up in 15, a significant increase again in the number of the Alachua County residents who are aware the grass clippings were a problem. So just reaching out to the professionals, they're reaching the population at large, yeah? Reinforcing it, turning it into a normative behavior. Okay, going specifically to what we're trying to accomplish here in the Lagoon-wide grass clippings campaign is we're trying to gather partners in all 5 counties to put in a little bit of money each so we can do some substantial research to understand, who's the audience, what information resonates with them, what materials will work best in the Lagoon area versus Alachua County, and then developing those media pieces, pre-testing some items with focus groups, and then each organization would pay to print what they want out of that package of materials that's created. All right, and I think I have one more. So the total cost for this is $43,000. This is it broken down. We'll do an observational study in one area for $6,000, and then we'll do the focus groups for $14,000. Social marketing analysis and recommendations for $12,000, design and print media pieces for $8,000, and then the web pages and Facebook media pages is an additional $3,000. So that all adds up to $43,000, and we have money dedicated from Martin County, for sure St. Lucie County. Volusia is seeking some more. Indian River is still undecided, and we're seeking $10,000 from Brevard.
Let me take the floor.
And that's it. I have questions. I'll take questions.
In a moment. Very erudite presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Exactly what we expected. I think in front of us is a binary question and one that's analog. The binary one is, do we want to recommend that there be trust fund money allocated to this effort? And the analog question is how much? You've asked for 10K. Okay. Virginia, question to you. Do you have money currently available in the existing fiscal year that you could, as a discretionary fund that you control, allocate to this?
Yes.
If we said do it.
Yes, the question is how. So there's 125,000 budgeted for outreach. The plan had specified that it would be fertilizer focused on retail. So we could pull 10,000 from that. Alternately, we have balance forward from last year, revenues that came in ahead of collections that we could go ahead and draw from. So those are the two options.
Does it require BOCC action?
I'd need to double check, but I think depending on, you know, how you word it, certainly there is fertilizer on grass clippings. And so I think we might be able to make the nexus that it's close enough to what was in the plan.
And if you ask forgiveness rather than permission, you'd be comfortable with that?
Yes.
Okay. And there is a question of is 10K the right amount? We're $7 million ahead this year, and you're coming short on some of your other counties. 70% of the Lagoon area is in Brevard County. Let me open the floor up to questions to Leesa and to Virginia on this, but let's concentrate these questions on the dollar side of it, which is the ask to us, rather than how you ought to run the campaign. Yes, please, Stephanie.
If Indian River did not agree, what would be the amount that you still need?
It is, well, we're at 25 right now, so we need, I don't know, 18, 18,000 left.
I think that's reasonable considering the fact that Martin County's already putting in 20. We have 70% of the lagoon here. 18,000 I think is reasonable, and then if Indian River does contribute, you can have that for other advertising purposes in the future to put toward.
If we can't match the crackers down in Martin Carney, shame on us. Other comments? Yes, sir.
Yeah, Lisa, so can you quantify the nutrient loading from grass clippings? I mean, you could probably do it on a per unit basis, but do we have an idea of how much is being contributed overall?
Well, you know, Anthony actually did a pretty darn good calculation in his staff report, I thought. I don't have it here in front of me. And I don't have my reading glasses.
Yeah, Anthony, I don't know if you want to come sort of walk through this, but we looked at how many grass clippings are produced by the average size lawn, how much of that lawn is street frontage, what is the nutrient concentration in those grass clippings. We added up all the streets in Brevard County that are curb and gutter, not the ones with swale where the grass clippings are going to end up in a swale and the nutrients are probably going to get attenuated in the swale or the ditch, whatever. We looked at the ones that are going to be on a concrete gutter washed into the stormwater system the next rain event or the next time somebody's sprinkler sprinkles the road. And so,
I mean, the simplest answer is St. Augustine has 2.5% nitrogen. So that's the data we know. And IFAS has done some numbers as far as how much grass clippings are produced per yard based on the average St. Augustine yard that's, you know, maintained in an average manner as they recommend. So as Virginia explained, we came up with this fairly conservative value because we couldn't calculate everyone blowing off their driveways, sidewalks, the malls with 14 different islands that just get blown out and spread out. So, and then all the canal fronts. So that's another target audience are canal front homes where you have grass going straight to your seawall. And if you're mowing straight down that seawall, you have nitrogen directly into the water. So we came with a fairly conservative answer. And
of $1.22 per pound.
yeah, Yeah, so
So even if we're off by, an order of magnitude, it's still 10 times cheaper than the next cheapest thing in the plan.
Well, and it also goes in the direction of changing attitudes. This is, even if it doesn't save a whole lot of nitrogen going in the river, it makes people think about how do you keep nitrogen from going in the river. Yes, Tom?
That was going to be my exact statement. As sacrilegious as it is for an engineer to say, I don't care about data on this one, I don't care about data on this one, because it's one of those that there's so many pieces of this messaging of how the storm system works and clogging and flooding, and we just spent an hour talking about sewer. Guess what? When there's a clean out missing and you block a storm drain and it floods, one of the biggest sources of inflow and overflows in the sewer system is when you get street flooding that comes into the sewer. So I think there's many follow-ons that can be had to this with correlation to sewer, with tying into messages on down the road on fertilizers and things like that. I think it's a fabulous start, and I think I agree, we shouldn't be beat out by Martin County on it.
Yeah, and this isn't a campaign to quit blowing grass, because that would be bad too. The stuff lands on the sidewalk, it lands in the street, it lands on the driveway, it lands on the top of your canal seawall. If it just sits there, the next place it goes is in the river.
Right, and as Alachua County showed, it was really a campaign on promoting professionalism.
Yeah, all right. Dave, you have a comment?
All right, so at $1.22 a pound, so we're looking at 12,200 pounds of nitrogen then, right, annually? That's our figure?
Yeah, so what did you come up with? And I grant, all the roads and all da-da-da-da, what's the estimate of how many pounds?
It was
90,000
90,000
pounds
of
a
nitrogen.
year. 90,000 pounds a year.
I'm in
And
the
so
who cares camp.
Yeah, so the dollar per pound calculation was based on the $10,000 request that we had, and assuming that once we had this marketing campaign, we would then spend $20,000 a year buying ad time and space and printing material, whatever it is that you actually are recommended that you do. We would also have $20,000 a year for 5 years. That was the basis of the $1.22 per pound.
The action before us is, do we spend the money or not? I would entertain a motion to, identify the, yes, please.
Go ahead.
Identify the, yes or no, do we want to direct or to recommend that Dr. Barker allocate money? B, what's the source, education fund, and C, what's the amount? I would entertain that motion if someone wanted to make one.
I move that we approve usage of the Indian River Lagoon funds for this education project in the amount of $18,000.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
I move to amend the motion to kick it up to 20K in a round number. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion? Is there any public comment? We have an amendment before us to, yes, sir?
Okay, well, some discussion. First off, thank you, Dr. Souto. I had made a whole bunch of notes and learned a lot from your presentation.
Thank you.
Which shut me up right away. Surprise.
It's always our goal here.
We're bringing her back every two.
So, well, first of all, there's absolutely no education in her proposal. It's just research to find out how we build an educational plan. So let's be clear to say that we're not doing any education whatsoever. Secondly, I agree with you, Todd. We need to do attitude change. I do think it's happening. I do think there's some, and I'd love to talk to you on the side about some of the research and all. But you've admitted from the beginning that this is the convenience choice. Nobody really knows if grass clippings are making that significant a contribution. Thank you for at least attempting to quantify it, Virginia. Okay. Regulations are not working, but I'm not sure that there's data behind some of these statements. 10 grand, I don't have a problem with. 20 starts to sound like a little bit of money to me. And it's just to find out where we're going to build a campaign and if we should build a campaign. Are both of those part of what you're doing? Because you pick convenience. If it turns out that it really is just a message of let's all be better to the lagoon, this might be the way to go there, but I'd like to know that we're actually having an impact. Is that?
I'm not sure I got your question, but
Okay, that's fair.
we are building a campaign. We're not doing the research to determine if grass clippings are a major, where it is in the list of 100 behaviors, right? I mean, that's a lot of research to figure out, like, of all the behaviors that are being done to as a source to pollute the lagoon with nitrogen, what's the order, right? How do we rank these all in
Dr.
terms of?
Treffy's rated it from muck and from atmospheric nitrogen. I mean, so grass clippings
Those aren't behaviors.
Those are sources.
Well, isn't it a source?
Behaviors are.
Okay, I got that, but then maybe we need to go back to source. Because if it's not that big of a source.
Yes, the source is humans.
Okay.
And humans have a myriad of behaviors. So you have to address behavior change, you need to focus on one behavior and hammer it. And ideally, so there is a body of literature, and we did that. So we've gone and looked at Doug's site, we've done the literature review to figure out the likelihood, right? So that's where science starts. Is this an issue somewhere else? Are other people finding, do data exist elsewhere?
No, you demonstrate this well. I got your notes. No, I appreciate.
We just don't know where they are in the list of
we
all
don't
the
know if they're
behaviors
number 2
here.
or number 10, but they're a problem.
But fundamentally, how big is the problem? Or do we say it's not that big? Or we say we don't care if it's a big problem, just because it's convenient and is part of a good message, that's why we support this. Is that is that it?
It's like chicken soup. Can't hurt.
So the convenience piece is
There's no proof
is
that you can
powerful because I've been involved in many communications campaigns, and the tendency of particularly technical professionals is to talk about the biggest issues or what you want to talk about, and that's not necessarily what people want to hear or will receive or gives them actionable information to get more involved. And in this, I feel like it hits those marks of where nobody questions. I don't think, simply through passage of this referendum, we know that people are interested in it. Converting that into actionable items is really important, and in that case, convenience is a big player because it's simple. It's something that takes them that next steps from being able, saying I'm willing to pay my half cent, that is disconnected every time they go to the store. They're not thinking about it. It is what it is. But now this is something that starts to connect into personal behaviors, which for me is huge. And it's simple, it's easy to process, and it starts to build that engagement. And
Dr. Windsor.
Since Dr. Treffry's name was invoked again.
In positive ways.
In every public presentation he's given in the last 6 months, he's complained about every time he goes field sampling, people are throwing grass in the lagoon. So it's not that he's not aware, and he's very adamant about if he could stop one thing from happening right now, it's from people throwing grass in the lagoon. The other thing is, this group challenged the NGO educational organizations probably almost a year ago now to go out and get together and put their act together and come forward with something that really, that's what they did. They got together for a 2-day work, and they put together an outstanding proposal, and I don't understand why we're going on with this. I think we should just move forward.
We're going to vote shortly, David.
When this conversation started 15 minutes ago, Virginia, you had indicated that the 10,000 could come out of existing. I just want to make sure that you're still okay at 20,000 doing that.
So, thank you. Excellent question. I think what I would want to do, I would want assurance from you all that when we bring you back a revised plan with all the substitute projects, we would make that 125,000 whole again. We would only tap into that momentarily to get working on this now, because Martin County's already going forward, and I want our data collected at the same time as Martin County's data collected so that we can compare our results and look for commonalities and hopefully choose a campaign that works best lagoon-wide and not end up with they picked something that really doesn't work as well here because we were, late to the switch. So that's
let me give you my assurances, that's the last thing I want to talk about in this meeting, okay? And let's carry it on there. Other public comment, or other comments? Are there public comments? Yes, please. This is on the topic of us kicking 20K into this. Okay. We have, yes, sir? Yes.
Can we not, you also indicated that we could potentially take the money from the additional funds.
Yes.
And so that would be my recommendation, that the money not come from the money that's already been allocated, but that we take the money from the additional funds that have come in, and then we don't have a problem.
I'm not aware of any authorization to use those funds from the county commission.
Right.
Is that correct? So this would have to go to the county commission if we said that.
Okay.
And rolling in with a 20K request is going to waste time that they don't want to waste.
I think I think we're saying the same thing, because she's talking about a temporary funding from the 125, and then when we revise the plan, we would make it whole, which essentially comes from those funds. So it's just timing of that expenditure.
She's saying that we're going to use 20,000 now instead of the 10 they recommended, but hopefully knowing we're all going to be okay with reestablishing that 125 next year whole again. So we'll make it up. Is that correct?
We'd make it up at mid-year, the
Mid-year,
county's
that's
mid-year budget amendment process, in April, March or April.
Do you see what I'm saying?
I'm going to call a question unless somebody grumps at me. We have a main motion that says 18K out of the 125K education fund already authorized in the Lagoon plan to go to this, to contribute to this proposal. There is a First Amendment that would change the 18K to 20K. We vote now on the First Amendment. Should we change the number to 20K? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The main motion now says that we're going to put 20K against this out of the source I just described. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? It passes unanimously.
Did we have a second on that first? Make sure
we did a second.
Yeah.
Thank you.
From a General Robert viewpoint, I think we did it right. Okay. Dr. Souto, this is what the Indian River Lagoon Coalition is all about. Thank you. Thank you. The last item of business before us is from Walker Dawson. It's a report on what they've done in my old stomping grounds, Puget Sound.
So if y'all recall, I believe it was the September Citizens Oversight Committee meeting, Dr. Treffery had recommended that we reach out to and potentially tap some of the folks from the Puget Sound Water Quality Management Action Team, I think is what it's called now, and get their guidance and input and potentially recommendations on our plan, because you, John, had brought up the question, what was how good was our plan? You had directly asked Dr. Treffery, and that spurred the discussion of, do we need input from experts who have experience in, water quality improvement and issues similar to what we're looking at. So I did some research on the Puget Sound Water Quality Management Plan. It has a very extensive history. The first plan was rolled out in 1987. They did plan updates twice every 2 years up to 1991, or I'm sorry, up to 1996. Then there were some legislative changes in Washington State. They now have what is called the Puget Sound Water Quality Action Team, who is housed in the governor's office, and they do basically a state of the Puget Sound report every year, where they look at different indicators on the quality of the water in the sound through evaluation of different environmental components, so on and so forth. So I reached out to a gentleman by the name of Scott Redman, who is the Science and Evaluations Program Director, and he said they were somewhat flattered and they would that we would consider them for reviewing our plan. And he basically asked for guidance. He said, well, what do you want us to do? And I'm looking for the COC to provide us some guidance and specific elements that we want them to look at. And I'd also ask that the COC keep in mind that this would be voluntary on their part, so I want to keep it very focused, and they're going to be doing it on their own time, so to speak. So I'd like to get some input from the COC on what exactly we are looking for from the Puget Sound Water Quality Management Action Team.
Can you first tell maybe me or all of us why we chose Puget Sound as our area to review?
First and foremost, that came as a recommendation from Dr. Treffery when he had presented here back in September. I went and did a little bit of research, a lot of research actually, on what their water quality management plan was. And I can give you just a brief list of some of the topics that are similar to what we were dealing with. They're dealing with very different issues there, as I'm sure you can imagine, anybody who knows Washington State, Puget Sound, but some of their program components that are similar, they have a contaminated sediments and dredging program, on-site sewage system program. They also have stormwater and combined sewer overflow programs, education and public involvement, and then also monitoring. They also have another near a dozen programs that they administer because they have so much that they're dealing with there.
Can you compare their watershed area and their population to ours?
Yes, their watershed is about 15,000 square miles.
It's profoundly different.
Yeah, it's very.
Different.
They have 10,000 rivers and streams that flow into Puget Sound itself.
10,000?
10,000.
Oh yeah.
And they have, I believe, their population. They have 4 urban areas that are along Puget Sound. They have Everett, Olympia, Tacoma, and Seattle. So I believe.
And Bremerton.
Yeah.
And Shipyard, et cetera.
David, to your point, and I think it's a good one, once we figure out kind of what we want to ask, why, I don't know if it would hurt, other than Walker's additional time, to maybe ask Chesapeake,
Yes,
ask some of the other areas as well, whatever information we're looking to get, which could contribute, hopefully, to a better understanding.
If I could, the answer to your question, why Puget Sound, is because they're about 70 years ahead of us. Mm-hmm. They started in Lake Washington and Lake Union in the early 50s to form the Metro Sewer District to clean up those 2 cesspools. They did it well enough that Bill Gates built a home for his father on the shores of Lake Washington. He lives there too. It is beautiful, pristine water. Mm-hmm. The hydrology, the topography, the science, the ecology, everything of Puget Sound Basin is profoundly different than it is here. But the tools that they have to apply and the public communications, et cetera, are in the same ballpark. I would suggest that, first of all, I was going to say, if Vinny didn't, that we ought to also make a similar outreach and see if we can get some volunteer help from the Chesapeake Bay and also from Tampa Bay. Those are 2 very successful predecessors of what we're doing. And I think all we want to do is say, here's our plan. Do you have comments and recommendations on areas we've missed, things we should emphasize more, things that you see very good, and so on? Keep it a very general request. They can decide how much effort, volunteer effort, they want to put against it, and we see what we get back. Okay. I think it's enough different that drilling down to pounds of nitrogen, et cetera, is not going to get us where we want to go. Mm-hmm. I think it's enough alike that a general question will come back with a very responsible answer. Dwayne, do you want to say something? Let's bring Dr. DeFries.
Dwayne DeFries, Executive Director of the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program. Over the last 6 months, I've had the pleasure of reading 28 comprehensive conservation management plans, including Chesapeake Bay and including Puget Sound, which are not in the NEP. And so what I'd like to do is assist your staff in kind of picking through this. And recognize that what you all are doing in the Save Our Lagoon plan is kind of the 4 really big hits. And since you invoked my name, I agree that nitrogen is clearly the focus we need. My comments about economics, you've heard, just I worry about trying to put everything in $1 per pound, because if we did that with that wastewater failure during that one event, it wouldn't look on a cost per pound very cost effective, but we know we have to solve that problem. But clearly you're on the right path based on my review. I know all of the directors, we meet twice a year in all those NEPs. If staff wants to come up to our spring meeting, I can make that happen if you want to engage one-on-one. But if you have staff chasing this in multiple areas, they're going to spend a lot of time, and I will volunteer my time to help your staff so they don't have to do what I've just done, and that's read 28 of these almost unreadable documents.
We now have acquired 2 volunteers. That's a good thing.
Thank you, Dwayne.
Walker and Virginia, would you think the pot was right and be satisfied with this committee's input if you 3 folks work together?
Yeah, I think we just wanted to make sure that there wasn't some specific question that you all were looking for that we weren't asking for. So if there's, we'll keep it
You
general.
might ask how it looks
very-
for winter Chinook fishing in Puget Sound. Some folks interested in that.
If I could plug, real quick.
Yes, please.
I'm assuming this is going to be covered. Washington, the Puget Sound area, that's a demographic in a region that, you know, is vastly different than ours, and I would like to expect to see some of that explained out. How you know, what would they, how can their experience apply to what may be a more conservative political base here than they have out there? You know, that part of the country tends to, you know, be willing to throw any amount of money towards the government to solve problems, and here less so.
Not east of the mountains.
And I'd be curious. I'd be curious to know what their recommendation or suggestions to us might be to you know, I guess, you know, going towards behavior change.
All right. The question that in the cheat sheet that Virginia gave me is, are there any specific requests from the COC vis-a-vis this effort? Are there any? Yes, sir.
I don't have a specific. I'd like to echo what John said. All of these locations, whether it be the Chesapeake Bay, North Carolina, Puget Sound, Tampa Bay, we're very, very different. I don't think getting into any specifics will help us. But the general question, here is our plan. What did we miss, if anything? What would you add? And any experiences within each of the 4 things? But very, very general. I mean, because all of these are, the sources are different, the geologies, everything's different. So here's our big 4 points on our plan. What, did we miss anything on a big point? I don't want to drive these guys crazy. And I think Dwayne's probably, you could probably have a conversation with him and in about 2 hours have all the answers we need anyway.
And to Terry's point, it's just, I would ask them just to say what questions come to mind reading the plan, and encourage them to question it. I wouldn't want them to feel that adding questions to our plan is going to hurt our feelings or anything like that. But I know when somebody gives me a plan, the first thing I'm thinking of is, okay, where are there holes in here?
Right.
Yeah. And not telling them that they need to find the answers to those holes, but let us know where the holes are, and we'll go dig and see how it fits into our situation.
Understood.
Let me try a couple statements. One, I believe it's true, Virginia will tell me, that you have full discretion to allocate time on this and no more or less than you think it's worth. And secondly, if you get any early results that feed back into next year's Lagoon plan, I assume we'll see them coming forward.
Yes.
And with that, are we satisfied with this agenda item? Thank you very much. And this is, you know, we get by with the help of our friends. The Beatles said that.
Thank you.
There's a whole bunch of people that care about this. We are now at general public comments, and we have one candidate already. Sir.
My name is George Rosenfield. I live in Suntree. I am a environmental scientist, but I'm retired. Retired too a little bit. This is somewhat similar to what I may have said last month. I have a letter from the Florida State economist, Professor Randall G. Holcomb from Florida State University, and the subject that the impact of residential development and what the county spends on it is much more than the county ever receives back from the development, residential development, in taxes. Due to the cost of the infrastructure, the sewers, the roads, police, fire, health, everything else combined. County spends more than they receive directly from that development. And in addition, the county commission, again, as I mentioned, is sabotaging the work that we're doing here in this group, because they approved the North Merritt Island development, which is a multi-family and a very large development for a small area, and it's all on septic tanks. And again, on the Southwest Expressway, as I said, as I said, even 5 or more years ago, it was a subterfuge to develop the Flatlands because they were jealous of the Duda property getting all that money. But I don't think I gave a copy of the letter from this professor to you, and I do have a copy here, and I made this time. That's essentially what I had, but I would like to make a comment on what Walker just said about the Puget Sound. Yes, it is different geographically and geologically and ecologically from what we have here. Due to the climate, it's completely different, and the terrain is completely different. However, the Chesapeake Bay area and the cleanup of the Chesapeake Bay is more similar to the problems that we have here. That completes this. If we have time and interest later, I'd like to say something about fire, like forest fire and the fire that's going on in California and the fires that we used to have in Florida, and how we changed, but California didn't. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. Other public comments? Yes, sir. Mr. Lamb.
I'll distribute this letter via email.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Vince Lamb of Merritt Island. I'm working with a small group of people that are environmentally conscious here on something that I want to bring to the attention of the Citizens Oversight Committee. We're encouraging Brevard County to pass an ordinance requiring signage at fertilizer outlet locations that has the high points of the fertilizer ordinance on it. And basically is, and we have done some work visiting some of these locations and know that their staff is not volunteering any information. There's been a voluntary effort going on in Volusia County, some of it here with the MRC, and trying to put information into the fertilizer retail areas. And it's just not working fast enough that we think that an ordinance is a good idea. So, what we're doing is choosing some people that know certain county commissioners and support this, visiting county commissioners, and determining what the degree of support is among the county commission in such an ordinance. We've had 2 such meetings and have we have strong support from 2 county commissioners, and we've got the others scheduled in the next few weeks. So this requires no money from from the county. It's just something that we think would help the education program that was talked about earlier to be able to do this. So I just wanted you to be aware of it. No comment is needed. But if you have any, if any of you want to provide personal comments to me or something, that's fine. But it's an effort that's underway that I think will help the lagoon and is complementary to what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vince. Other public comments? Yes.
Dwayne DeFries, Executive Director, Indian River Lagoon Program. Number one, I bring gifts today. We have a box of our traditional Indian River Lagoon calendar. And so if you need more, let us know. To be honest, I'll tell you a funny story. I was thinking that, why do we really need a calendar when I took this job? And my staff said, wait until you deliver the first box. And the fact is, these are highly sought after, and they go really quick. And there's an educational message. And with that, I want to tell you how pleased I am and supportive of your decision to support that grass clipping research. One of the challenges I have had is that trying to get 5 counties, 38 cities, numerous municipalities, kind of all, we don't need to be in the same lane, but we need to be on the same highway, running in the same direction has been a challenge. And so when you take a leadership role like you just did on a lagoon-wide research that will guide education, that's exactly where we should all be. And so I want to just let you know that in about a week, and we're just waiting for legal clearance, we will release several RFPs for our fiscal year 18-19, which would begin next October. So there'll be a bucket for restoration projects, another bucket for science and technology, another one for citizen engagement, and for the first time ever, a small grants program. And compared to your revenues, ours pale in comparison. I mean, we every year have about $1.5 million to stretch over those deliveries, but we get remarkably great proposals, and I would recommend that you may be wanting to think ahead as you take that project to the next round. I don't get to review, I try to stay out of it, but those will hit the street with a February deadline. And lastly, I'm going to be looking to you and your staff, each of you individually and your representative organizations, to assist as we move forward with this revision of the Comprehensive Conservation Management Plan. It's a heavy lift. Took Tampa Bay 2.5 years to do theirs. We're going to try to have a draft available for really heavy public review sometime in June and July, and that is going to occupy almost all of my time for the next 4 to 6 months. But we'll be reaching out. And so the things that you've already done here actually are guiding me greatly, on the higher end where, broad guidance usually pushes that tactical delivery and implementation. You're already doing the work. So congratulations to you. Your deliberations are solid. Your questions are good. And continue to stick with science-driven, and I think we'll all get there. So thank you, and Happy New Year, and Happy Holidays.
And at the rate of 1 slide a minute, could you put together 15 slides to present your draft sometime this summer to us so we could comment?
What I promised Virginia, and it may be sometime in spring, is an update on where we are. Okay. If that's getting around the March, I have a good handle on where I want to go. And John, was intimately involved in the 2008 revision. It's not easy to revise these because they operate at a high level, but they need to be specific enough to be able to give good project guidance. We have a project list that is emerging right now that is pushing $1 billion without including IRL South. And so I'm talking to Virginia. We're going to make sure that our kind of high-level lagoon-wide plan is totally in alignment with what you all are doing, but we have some areas that we've never addressed before, like emergency response. You all have talked about monitoring. I think it's clear what we've seen after Irma and during the last 2 years that I've been executive director, that while we have really excellent sampling and monitoring programs at certain levels, we have massive gaps in some of the information that we need that we simply don't have. And Puget Sound, Chesapeake Bay, Narragansett Bay, we were with many of those players in November, and we're going to need to re-look at how we look at this lagoon as a monitoring design. And so we have been promised by EPA, Office of Research and Development, some support on that, and we will be writing a white paper on monitoring in this fiscal year that we're in, and we'll be looking to the county for assistance on what the county's doing. So yes, I'm available to you actually anytime you want, either me or anybody within the NEP purview. We're here to help.
Thank you, Dwayne. Any other public comments? That closes public comments. We're at the last item on the agenda, which is final comments by the chair and committee members. Let me alter that slightly and first ask Dr. Barker, do you have any comments?
None, except please stop calling me doctor. I have not earned that title.
Well, get hot. I'm sorry. You just added your name to the list of people that ought to have doctorates and don't, friends of mine. All right. Do you have any comments? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's go around the horn this way. Gene?
Great meeting. Thank you all.
Good, thank you.
I'll reserve. I've got a comment at the end, please.
It's our anniversary.
Yeah.
About a year. Happy anniversary, everybody, and happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
I just really appreciate the discussions that are here. I think they've been fabulous.
Let me tee up a couple things. First, let me apologize to Dr. Souto for not naming her organization correctly. It's Marine Resources Council. Yes, apologies. I think you should feel free in your solicitation for funds against this effort to shame the other counties to say that we not only kicked in, we doubled the amount without asking. The last thing I have, we've got $7 million sloshing around just out of this year, and we can't count on future years, but that's a pretty good chunk of change. One of the things that we talked an awful lot about this meeting and in the past is the role of education. And so I've got two, as a committee member, two recommendations I passed forward to Virginia on Dr. Barker. One is to look at the amount of money in the Lagoon plan, both in the next year and in out years, and it ends in 5 years, maybe we need 10 years. Look at the amount of money there and say, is it enough? And secondly, look at broadening the language so it doesn't just deal with fertilizer. I, as a voter, would welcome a recommendation on that when you present that. There being no more, one last item of business. Even though we started 14 minutes late, we're finishing 26 minutes early. There being no more business come before this body, this meeting is adjourned.
The opinions expressed by any member of the public during any period of public comment do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, or the program sponsor, and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, and the program sponsor hereby expressly disclaim any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public during any such period.